I want to talk about this market that we tried to talk about yesterday, but we were really crunched on time, and I knew eventually we would get to it, and we got a whole hour to talk college football, Rob. I know you're jacked up about this. This market that I am intrigued to bet this year. So I was very successful betting this market last year. It was, and from my understanding, I haven't looked at all the books, but BetMGM, I think, is the only shop to offer these props. And it is total number of conference teams to win 10 or more regular season games. Not the bowl games, not the playoff, regular season games. Every team plays 12 regular season games. FCS games count too. Last year, the SEC number was 2.5 with plus money juice to the over. And after the first few months of the season, I was thinking this thing was going to cash easily. But it took a Tennessee win on the last day of the year for me to get the third team across the finish line. This year, they have bumped up the number to 3.5 teams in the SEC to have at least 10 regular season wins, with even odds to the under, minus 120 to the over. I think I'm going to, flip it and reverse it this year. I think last year I was over 2.5, which means I needed 3 teams to win 10 or more games. This year, I'm thinking more parity, and you gave me a better number. Now I need 4 teams for me to win, and I think that's too many. I think I barely got to 3 last year, and now I get even odds on 3 would be a win for me if I bet the under. So do I think the SEC is the best conference in football? Yes. Do I think there's a lot of parity? Yes. Do I think 4 teams are going to have at least 10 wins in the regular season? That's where I draw the line. What say you, sir?
I don't think it's unfair. For the record, and obviously we're talking playoffs here, but when you talk about the regular season, if I'm talking about teams out of the SEC I think can get to the playoffs, the list is probably Texas, Georgia. I actually think Tennessee can get there. I know they had the drama with Nico Iamaleava. I think they could get in. I think Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin could potentially back their way in if they replace Jackson Dart. I think LSU has to get in, or Brian Kelly's probably getting kicked out of the family when it's all said and done. I think Alabama under Kalen DeBoer takes a step forward. I think A&M's good enough to get in. Honestly, I think South Carolina could backdoor their way in. They do have one of the toughest schedules in football this year. That's a tough spot. And then there's a couple of borderline. The point here is I'm looking at a conference that I'm comfortable saying there's at least 5 teams that are legitimate playoff threats. And then probably 2 to 3 more that I think are like, okay, if they have a really special season, if they win a couple of dark horse games, they could backdoor their way in. I can't say that there are 4+ teams that are getting to 10 wins with that many teams that are playoff threats, unfortunately. And this was a narrative that way back in the day, down here in ACC territory, used to drive the ACC fans, that the SEC cannibalize itself, right? Like, oh, we all beat up on each other all the goddamn time. That's why we get up, right? I think that's actually true this year. A narrative I used to just absolutely feel my blood pressure spike over. Somebody would say that to me, and I could see the nerve popping up in the blood vessel popping up in the middle of my forehead. And this year, I'm like, that actually might be legitimate. That might be a real good take this year. And if that is the case, I do think you will have Georgia as a 10-win team. I got to tell you, I might be the only person in America that has question marks about Texas. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point. But I think they get there. I really think LSU, if they beat Clemson in week 1, can be a 10-win team. And then I'm probably going to fight to find 2 more teams that I legitimately think are 10-win teams. I'll probably play the under, to be honest with you. I'm probably not going to touch that bet at all because I could see it being 3. I could see it being 5. And I think my favorite part about this conversation is that I feel this way about a couple of different conferences. And it feels to me that this is the first year in a long time. And that I don't know if you want to give credit to NIL or the portal or great recruiting nationwide or whatever, but it really does feel like this is the most parity-filled year of college football that we have been going into in a very long time.
Yeah. And that's why I think getting 4 teams to 10 wins is going to be tough. Yeah. I think, and again, last year, hold on, let me go back to the standings last year. And it's going to be a little tough to sift through because these standings include the postseason, but I'll do my best to kind of backlog it. So Texas, Georgia, Tennessee. Those are the three teams, right? Bama finished 9-3. Tennessee finished 10-2. Georgia finished 10-2. Texas finished 10-2. Yeah, I think that's right. When we get to this season, unless you think Bama, LSU, South Carolina, really, those are really the only three teams that I could see getting to 10. I don't see LSU getting there. I don't know if I see South Carolina getting there. I really don't. I think Florida's intriguing with Lagway, but he's got to stay healthy. To me, I really see it as a 3-team race in the SEC. And we can get, let's take the conversation to Tennessee, because Tennessee was the deciding team last year. Tennessee, I needed a win on the last day of the freaking year in order to get there. And now you lose Iyamilava, right? Nico's at UCLA. You replace it with Joey Aguilar, who I like, but I don't love. I don't know who that third team is. I think Texas and Georgia, to me, are going to win 10 games this year. I feel comfortable saying those two teams are going to win 10. Maybe they're not undefeated. Maybe they're not 11-1. I feel comfortable saying those two teams win 10 games. I can still win this bet if Tennessee and or Alabama both win 10. If Tennessee and or South Carolina win 10. If both of them win 10, then I'm out. The other part of this discussion is what you just mentioned about Texas. They go to Ohio State week 1. They could lose that game. And then all of a sudden, they can only lose one more game the rest of the year to get to 10 wins. They have to go to Georgia. They have to go to the Swamp. The rest of their schedule is relatively easy, except for that last game against A&M, which is always a war. I could absolutely see, and let's be honest, Oklahoma's going to be better, and Red River's always a rock star game. I could see Texas going 9-3 and getting into the playoff. I just think I'm at the point in the SEC where NIL has now made it a lot easier for some of these mid-tier teams to compete and get those top players. And if Texas doesn't beat Ohio State week 1, I don't know if they're getting to 10. What do you think about that?
I agree with that out of the gate as far as Texas. I also think we're going to learn a lot about that right out of the gate, because that is, as you mentioned, week 1 opening day game. Tennessee, I'm intrigued by. They lose Dylan Sampson. They lose Nico Iyamilava. They do bring Aguilar over from Appy State. That's a dude I've watched play. He is a playmaker. Is he able to do it in the SEC? I don't know. We're going to find out very quickly. If the answer is yes, then I really like what Josh Heupel's doing at Tennessee. I think they're a possibility. I do think LSU is a possibility. The problem is, for LSU to get to 10, they probably have to beat Alabama, and that might take them out of that equation. If they are going to get to 10, they're going to have to beat a couple of the teams out South Carolina that you might be looking at as a potential overbet. Now, this is all good reasons to bet the under, in my opinion, right? Because if you are looking to force a next team outside of Texas, outside of Georgia, and again, even Texas is a question mark, but outside of Texas, Georgia, and maybe Bama to get to 10, they're going to have to. You're going to have whoever your fourth team is probably knock off one of the teams you need to get to 10, which also means you're relying on the team you need to get to 10 to probably be damn near perfect everywhere else in the regular season. So it just feels like there's too much stacked up. Listen, I cover South Carolina. I think South Carolina is good. Here's what I told Gamecock fans today on my show. I think South Carolina is an outside playoff team, but I think if they're going to get in, it's going to be at the number 12 spot, and it's going to be because they are the highest ranked 9-3 team. Tennessee in the final, or South Carolina, pardon me, in the final 6 weeks of the season, play 5 teams that are better be playoff teams, and one more that is a fringe team. They're going to be playing 6 teams in 7 weeks that could be a playoff team at the end of the year. That's the type of resume that gives you a little leeway to take an L, but still be considered with a team that is maybe a win better than you are, but doing it out of the Big 12 or the ACC. So I think they could get in there, be at 9, but I don't think they're getting to 10. I think 10 would be a spectacular season for Shane Beamer. And, you know, much like you said about Florida and DJ Lagway, a team I agree with, I feel the same way about Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. If they get to 10, it's going to be because Lenora Sellers is on his way to New York to go participate in the Heisman Trophy celebration at the end of the year. And I think he can, honestly. I've got a bet out on him and Cade Klubnik, both to be Heisman finalists this year. Almost parlayed him because that'd have been like 22-1, but I did take him as two separate tickets there. I think there is too many spots where to get 4 teams to 10, those teams are going to have to beat other teams that you also need to get to 10. And the
Exactly.
margin for error, and this is something that SEC coaches, and this is something that Greg Sankey, and this is something that ADs in this conference have been screaming for a long time. The margin for error in the Southeastern Conference is 0. It is razor thin. You do not have room for mistakes. It's a short runway there. So if you were telling me that in order for 2 teams to get to 10, that I will need to get to 10 to have 4 teams get to 10, but those 2 teams are going to have to beat the other 2 teams that I think will get to 10 in order to get to 10. That's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts for me to try to put something on the line here. So, I respect it if you want to go with the under bet. I don't think it's a bad bet, but it's also the SEC, and I could absolutely see a surprise team jump up there. I could also see a team like, I don't know, let's make up something absolutely wild and crazy and would definitely never happen. A Vanderbilt beats an Alabama, and that's their 3rd loss. Something crazy, right?
Yep.
That is such an unpredictable conference that is, I'm not going to say as good as it's ever been, but it is as spread out as it has ever been in terms of good teams. And I that's going to push me off of tailing you on that bet, I think.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned South Carolina because, like, you're right. Lenore Sellers could be the next coming of touchdown Jesus, right? If that's the case, then they're beating Ole Miss, they're beating Alabama, they're beating Oklahoma, and then Alabama's not getting to 10 wins because South Carolina beat them. And that's where I kind of get the vibe that the parity in the league means more teams are going to be closer to 500 than they are closer to undefeated, right? And that's kind of like, because when I was going into last year, I had the opposite approach. I was like, man, only 3 teams need to get to 10 wins. This is going to be cake, easy. And then I was sweating it out on the last day of the year for that 3rd team to get to 10 wins. And I have a feeling it's going to be the same vibes again this year. Vanderbilt could beat Bama. Absolutely. Maybe not exactly in that spot, but those types of games are going to happen this year. And I'll be honest, I don't know. I think Bama will be a little bit more consistent this year under Simpson and year 2 in the DeBoer era. They have to be, or else Tuscaloosa might be coming for him with pitchforks. But in order for a surprise team, right, and that's why I love this bet to the under. In order for a surprise team, let's just go to Florida, right? DJ Lagway's fantastic. If Florida wins 10, they got to beat Georgia and Tennessee, which means those teams are losing. So, and then they got to go to LSU and win. And that means LSU is going to lose a game. So it's kind of like this chutes and ladders. Like, in order for one of those teams to have this overachieving 10-win year, they're going to have to upset teams that you would already expect to have 10 wins. And that's where I think the balancing act comes into effect. Would I bet this if there was juice to the under? No. I think a coin flips price that we only have 3 teams, just like we had last year, win 10 games in the SEC. I feel pretty comfortable there. And I'll be honest, I'd be interested in an alt to see what the under 2.5 number would be if I would get a really fat plus money price there. So again, this is not like, oh my God, best bet, shove all your chips to the middle. But this is a way that if you're asking yourself, how do I bet on chaos? How do I bet on parity? That's how you do it. Under 3.5 teams to have 10 or more wins in the SEC this year.